Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Managing Partners Podcast. I'm Kevin Daisey. I'm your host. Today, I have an awesome guest that I'm pretty sure a lot of you know. I hear his name thrown around quite a bit. He runs an amazing firm, and I got Craig Goldenfarb on the show today. What's up?
Hey, Kevin. Good to be on the show, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we've been trying to connect for a while. I've heard about Craig. I've seen his stuff, and just been trying to drag him on the show here. So today, finally get to have him on. He's got some really awesome stuff to share. We're going to be talking about KPIs that you need to know for your law firm. And he's got a slide deck we're going to be sharing and showing, not just telling, showing the KPIs that he tracks and the things that you can be doing for your firm. So if you are listening on audio, you want to definitely check out the video version. We'll have that up on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or message me and I'll get you a copy. So Craig, thanks so much for preparing and getting the slide deck together for this. That'll be very actionable for folks that are listening in. So give us a quick intro about yourself for those folks that may not know who you are.
Sure. I'm in Florida. I'm a personal injury attorney, and I run a personal injury firm branded as Gold Law because my name is Goldenfarb. And we branded a while ago, and we incorporated a cool phone number, 222-2222. So part of our branding is Choose the Twos, which is on our billboards and TV ads and across our marketing platforms. And I started my law firm about 23 years ago, and I'm the sole owner, no partners, which is kind of cool. I get to make all the decisions. And we've grown quickly because about 15 years ago, I decided I'm not that great a lawyer, but I'm really a good businessman. So I decided to put my best skill set to use, which was not necessarily being in the courtroom, although I was okay. And I stepped out of the role of attorney and into the role of CEO. And with that came a lot of changes in my skill sets that I needed to learn. So for the last 15 years, I've basically run a company. I don't even use the word law firm anymore. When I'm introducing people to what I do, I say I am the CEO of a law firm. So that's how I introduce myself. I don't even say I'm an attorney. So that's really been my identity shift in the last 15 years. And I also teach around the country to lawyers and groups of lawyers in personal injury onto how to really convert their law firm from a law firm to a well-run business.
Well, man, I love it. You're preaching to the choir over here. This show's it's an entrepreneurship show. It's running a business. Just happens to be we talk about law firm businesses here. So I absolutely love that shift, that mindset to CEO versus just attorney, and really that's a lot of goal to a lot of the guests that I have on here or listeners that they're trying to get a handle on their firm. They're trying to run a better firm and to do better things out there. So great to hear that story here, and excited to have you share today. So everyone, you can also check a look at his firm, goldlaw.com. Super simple. Love the .com. I'm sure you bought that quite a while ago.
I did.
But super short. Love it. So Craig, I guess we want to jump right in. We're going to share, he's going to share his screen, and we're going to dive into his presentation. So, tune in, take notes. Again, this will be recorded. You can come back to it anytime. So
great.
So Craig, I'll be here to add commentary.
Fantastic. And interrupt me if you want to with any clarification. So one of the ways to convert your law firm to a company is to use data. And when we were in law school, we didn't learn how to use data. We learned how to do analysis of words, not necessarily numbers. So one of the shifts I had to make is from being thinking in terms of words and paragraphs and arguments to just looking at data. So that was one of the first shifts. And if you don't like data, or you don't like math or Excel spreadsheets or data management programs, that's fine. But you need to have someone in your organization who's a geek and who loves Excel and who loves data. And some larger law firms have data analytics employees, actually, some of the larger PI firms. So I happen to like data. So I have several employees who also like data. So we geek out on Excel and all the other programs I'm going to show you. So the first thing about KPIs is that what is it? So, KPIs is data. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first. I'm the founder and CEO of Gold Law, which was founded in 2002. And now we have about 12 attorneys and about 85 team members, pushing 90 team members. So I grow about 10% a year, and we're based in Florida. We have a couple of niches we do across the United States: sexual assault and defibrillator law, which is when someone dies, like, let's say, of a heart attack on a basketball court, and there's no defibrillator. So we've niched a couple of areas. I could talk for hours on niching, but we have a couple of nationwide niches, but mostly we stay in Florida. So that is my firm. And I decided to convert my law firm to a business, like I said, about 15 years ago, in about 2009. And I've been CEO for 15 years, and I handle 0 cases. So it shocks some people, but if you're really, you can be anywhere on the spectrum, and I'm definitely on the spectrum, says my wife, but you can be anywhere on the spectrum from handling 0 cases to just a few cases or having a full caseload. It's really what you like to do. Now, for me, the right thing to do is to not handle any cases. I wanted to be 100% entrepreneur. I'm not saying that's right for everybody. In fact, a lot of people went to law school to be lawyers. Surprise, surprise. I went to law school knowing that I probably would practice law for 10 years and then become a CEO, because I kind of knew when I was young that I liked business as much as I liked law. I just had to figure out which I liked better. And I was right. I liked business better. So nobody has to do that, but you can convert yourself to maybe 5 cases or 10 cases or even 50 cases if that's your happy place. So figure out where you want to be on that spectrum. For me, I'm on the far side of the spectrum, which is 0 cases, but I'm not saying that's right for everybody. So I run my office under a modified EOS structure. EOS is kind of taking the legal industry by storm these days after Mike Morse started it in about 5-10 years ago in Michigan. And it's based on a book called Traction, which I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with. Kevin's got it up there on his bookshelf. It seems like mandatory reading these days if you're looking to convert your law firm to a business. I run a modified EOS structure. I have an EOS coach that used to work for Fireproof, which is Mike Morse's company. So we are big proponents of running your company on an EOS. That stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And again, that's based on a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. If you're not familiar with that book, high recommend as book number 1 to read. It's called Traction.
I second that for sure.
Absolutely fantastic model of running any company, not just a law firm. So I personally run what I call a modified EOS system, which is 5 executives. I do not like having just a visionary and a COO because there's no redundancy in that model. So I love Traction, but if either the visionary or the COO dies, quits, gets fired, you don't really have redundancy. And corporations that are well run, I think, have redundancies. So I don't like the strict visionary COO model. So we have 5 executive team members, of which I am a member. But if I died, my other executives are cross-trained in my job. So I think a modified EOS model is a better model for me and my company. And if you look at some of the corporations around the world, they do have a visionary, an Elon Musk, a Steve Jobs, a Bill Gates, but they do surround themselves with people who could take over that role. So that's why I don't do a strict EOS model. I have what I call a modified EOS model. And a lot of people ask me about that. So that's why I thought I'd mention what model I use.
That could be a whole talk right there.
It is, absolutely. What EOS model should you use? And it's definitely a debate. Different law firms like the visionary COO model. I didn't like it. So we modified it under my system. So moving on, that's how I set up my company. So now let's move on to the topic, which is KPIs. So I don't assume that everybody knows what a KPI is. So let's start with that. A KPI is a key performance indicator. And of course, for the first 10 years of my law firm, I had no idea what that was. So I don't assume everybody does. So basically, a KPI is a data point for collection, analysis, or action. So it's just a data point. Like, how many cases do you have? That's a data point. It's a KPI. How many cases are in your office? A very simple one. Do you know that? So that's like KPI number 1. It's the same thing as running a store. Do you know if you run a sneaker store, you run Foot Locker, how many pairs of sneakers do you have in your store? It's basically, that's an inventory analysis. So, so KPIs are the same in law firms as they are in other companies. How many sneakers do you have, i.e., how many cases do you have in your office? So KPI is just a data point. Some people call KPIs metrics or statistics, or they can use any other term. But for purposes of today's discussion, a KPI is just a data point. In my law firm, I believe in the old standard saying, if it gets measured, it gets done. And numerous business gurus have said that in their books, but it's really powerful, because if you don't look at it and it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And when I'm going to talk about a very special KPI measure, that once I started measuring it, it increased what I earned in pre-suit by 3 times in my pre-suit department, a 3x, because I measured one data point. And then once I started measuring it, it got done and it got paid attention to. So I'm a big proponent in, if you pay attention to it, it matters. And I'll talk about one specific magical KPI I'll talk about later that really drives this one home.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Exactly. So if you don't measure it, nobody's paying attention to it, it's not getting done. So I measure my KPIs in 3 different systems in my office, because a lot of people want to get granular. Where do you hold these things? Where do you measure them? So EOS itself has a software called 90.io. There's only a couple of softwares that EOS uses. This is one of the OG original softwares for EOS. I use 90.io, and yes, that's .io, which is a weird suffix for software platforms. I didn't know that until I bought this one. So I measure my KPIs in EOS, in the 90.io. I also use FileVine as my CRM for my personal injury firm. I like 3 programs. I like FileVine, Litify, and Smart Advocate. Those are the newest generations of software. Any of those you can measure competently KPIs. I'm sure the other companies are going to get mad at me that I didn't mention them, but those are my 3 favorite. FileVine, Smart Advocate, and Litify are really the top 3 in the country for personal injury for data aggregation and measuring and displaying KPIs. FileVine happens to use a separate conjunctive software called Periscope for its showing, and I'll actually have a slide a little later that if you're watching the video for this, I'll show you what Periscope looks like. We also use a few Excel spreadsheets for data points that are not in FileVine, and that are not in EOS. So we use a few, but we try to stay away from Excel because Excel doesn't drag from other programs, whereas Periscope and EOS can drag data from your CRM. So we tend to stick with Periscope and 90.io for our KPI aggregation and measurement.
I'll add a tip there.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I like to use as much software as I can. We do have quite a few Excel sheets too, or Google Sheets, actually. We're a Google platform here, but Zapier. We use Zapier a lot to integrate with other APIs and pull and push into spreadsheets for us. So when we're using spreadsheets, they're usually pretty smart and they pull from other sources. But you can look at Zapier. You don't have to be a programmer, but we
use Zaps within FileVine, and we have someone who got certified in zapping. And I think FileVine also uses Workato, which is another Zapier-like platform within. So that's within FileVine. So there are different methods of grabbing data, as Kevin says, from your CRM. Zapier is a great one and probably the most well-known. So
we have thousands of Zaps, I think.
Thousands. Wow, that's great. So Zapier is great for grabbing data across platforms. Fantastic.
We've replaced we have a few positions that are not needed just because of Zapier and integrations that we have built out. So
that's fantastic. Kevin, do you use EAs overseas for zapping, or use in-house employees, or do you set them up? I'm just curious.
I have a office administrator who's been completely trained in running our whole Zapier processes. But my CEO, business partner, Eric, he's the one that kind of kicked it off. But he's now trained, and we brought up someone else that manages that. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Zapier is a great tool, and anything you can use to automate stuff is wonderful in your business. And I find that lawyers are last in line when it comes to automation. So if it's not your skill set, if you're not techie, I'm not techie, but I realize that we need to be. So our tech department is super geeky and techie and wonderful at all this stuff. So yeah, I can tell them what to do, and they can show me the data.
Some of the more technical aspects of Zapier, because you can actually code in there if you really wanted to pull stuff that is not API. You can grab stuff on websites. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. You can fill out forms automatically on a website for you from a data point. So, but you can also use like ChatGPT to write you some of the stuff that you would need to integrate with. So there's all kinds of advantages and things. But yeah, if you're not up to speed, I mean, I was in a room of attorneys yesterday, 30 of them, speaking about marketing and things. Not one of them out of 30 had an email list. Not one of them
Oh,
had,
you're kidding. Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
just the most basic of things. No process for networking, referral partnerships.
Wow.
Just the list went on. I wasn't even sure what I was going to teach them at that point. It was just the whole, because I got more technical as I went.
Yeah. Wow.
That was like,
Well, you were
I don't
talking to
know,
first
man.
graders and you were expecting to talk to high schoolers. Unfortunately.
It was pretty sad. But either way, if you're listening and you were there, probably aren't. But
Yeah, so tech is a super important department in our law firm because we've got to make sure that our tech can consolidate our data. So I'm showing on the screen just an interesting concept, and it's a screenshot from my EOS software. There's a scoreboard tab on the EOS software, and scoreboard is where we keep some of our top KPIs. And I heard a term a while ago called desert island KPIs. So if you're on a desert island and you have 2 minutes of cell service, and you want to learn how your company's doing before you die of starvation on your desert island. So I had to pick this, when I heard this speech 10 years ago, they said, okay, so you're going to die, but you want to know how your business is doing. So pick your top 10 to 15 KPIs you want to know before you enter the pearly gates. And so I picked 13 desert island KPIs, and it's the top 13 that you're like, if I know these things, I can go to sleep at night knowing what they are. So when I speak, I say I have hundreds of KPIs, which I do. I have over 100 cards, which are displays, different displays on my Periscope platform that I look at once a month. That's 100. But I have 13 here in EOS in my software that I can look at in 10 minutes and basically figure out where I am year to date, where I am comparison with my goals. So I'm introducing this screen merely for the fact that you can keep your top 15 somewhere. Wherever you keep them. And if you're on vacation for a month, which I do all the time, and I just want to check in, which I don't do much, but if I needed to, and say, hey, what's going on with the company? Are we above water, so to speak? I can just look at these top 13. So I could log in, I could ask, I could do whatever I want. So it's nice to have it boiled down to 10 to 15 basic KPIs. So I named them desert island KPIs for the reason I explained before, but it's a good concept because it takes me an hour or two to go over all 100 or 200 KPIs. But if you can boil them down, that's very helpful.
That's a great concept. I like that. And makes it a little bit more digestible for folks. I think sometimes we find ourselves tracking KPIs that take a lot of effort to track, and then they end up not being that important.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, I gave an example before. If you own Foot Locker store, you want to know how many sneakers you have. You want to know how much profit you make on each sneaker. You want to know how much money you've made this month or this year or this quarter. And you can really boil it down if you think of from a bird's eye view. If you were trying to explain to your spouse who doesn't care about the details, like, how you doing this year? Well, what 5 things would you tell your spouse who's eating dinner with you and doesn't know your business about how you're doing? Well, basically you'd say, well, how much money did we make this year? And are we in profit? Are we not losing money? Boil it down to what you would tell your spouse. And that's a good way of figuring out someone who's not interested, but they need to know, but they're not interested. That's what your desert island KPIs are. Easy to understand, easy for your spouse to go, okay, I'm comfortable, we can take a vacation.
I like that a lot. I like your setup. I mean, so for me right now, every Tuesday, I get my financial KPI dashboard from my financial admin, and then we get the marketing and sales KPIs from my office admin. And so just every Tuesday, post it in Slack where we can all have a look at it. I don't stare at them all day, but that works for us. And there's probably about 10 to 15 in each of those dashboards.
Sounds pretty efficient. I mean, it's up to your comfort level. I mean, some people are they hate KPIs and they're forced to look at them because they know they have to. And some people are KPI geeks like me, where I will spend, an hour and a half looking at all 100 once a month. And some people don't want to do that, but you need to have someone who's going to do it. And that's usually your CEO or your COO who's going to be staring at that data. So if that's not your skill set, you need to have it in your company. It doesn't need to be you, but it needs to be somebody. And that's part of what Traction and EOS teaches, is that role must exist. Whether it's you or not is irrelevant, but that role must exist. So I'm going to go I assume most of your listeners or many of your listeners are personal injury attorneys. So I'm going to go department by department quickly to kind of go over what are the top KPIs for each department. And if you're at home and you want to jot this down, great. If you want to look at the video on YouTube, great. But I'm going to kind of go over them quickly. So I'm going to start with intake. So intake, we have several KPIs. The first would be leads. A lead is anyone calling about a new case, period. So, and then we have a goal for each of these KPIs so we can measure it against our goals. So leads per month or per week, per quarter, however you want to measure it. But lead is a person calling about a new case. And it may even be a case that you're not interested in. So it could be, if you're a personal injury attorney, a caller about a divorce case is a lead because they're calling about a new case. So leads is all inclusive. The next one would be qualified leads. Now, a qualified lead is a case you want. So usually one metric is that in some marketing circles, they say 40% of your leads should be qualified. So if you're marketing correctly, that's not necessarily a tried and true number, 40%, but it's a good guide that if you're getting too many calls for divorces, well, then you're not marketing right because you're not a divorce attorney. So we measure that. So of our leads, about 40% should or could be qualified. Where'd I get that from? Just experience and from talking to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lawyers.
That was reinforced. I was at a conference this weekend in Chicago.
Oh,
and that's exactly the number.
Oh, wonderful.
That was used.
It looks like maybe I know what I'm doing because I've heard that number repeated. So I guess by agreement, we all seem to agree that maybe if you're marketing goodly, as our former president would say, if you're marketing goodly, then qualified leads should be about 40%. So then, of course, so then maybe signed cases per month. That's very important. Is of your leads and of your qualified leads, how many do you actually sign up? That's very important because what if you want 100 and you only signed up 50? Well, that's garbage. That's a horrible rate, and that is the fourth metric, which I'm going to talk about, which is your effective conversion rate. I call that ECR, and ECR is a fancy term for effective conversion rate, which is of the cases you want, how many did you sign? In sales, they call that their closing rate. How many did you close? And our goal is 95% at our law firm. A nationwide standard that I've heard is if you're doing above 90%, you're doing pretty well. Our goal this year is 94.7%, and I pay bonuses based on all this stuff, but we're at 94.7% as a goal for the year. If you can get above 90%, it's a pretty good closing rate in personal injury, and it means the people responsible for getting your clients to sign the contract are pretty good. Have you heard different numbers, Kevin, or is 90% kind of a standard?
I think you know some similar people I know, but again, spot on. This is exactly the number that was shared this weekend.
So, if you can hit 9 of 10, that's, if you think about it, you're hitting 9 of 10 free throws. That's pretty good at the line, so to speak. So if you can sign up 90% of your cases, great. I shoot a little higher. So I'm trying to get to 95%, and we have sales training, empathy training. We only hire salespeople in our intake department. We stopped hiring people with legal experience a long time ago because we realized they weren't the right people to hire for our intake department. So we hire former salespeople, and we teach them legal instead of hiring legal people and teach them sales. So that was a shift we did many years ago.
That's huge. I like that. And
big shift.
I think, the 95% number in the room at this conference, about 100 attorneys, I think it was a little bit of a shocking number for most to hear. Wow, that's a lot. That's a huge percentage. So
it is high. I mean, if you think about it, if you talk about sales, that's why we hire salespeople, because they're driven by that.
Yeah.
Legal people, that's a new term for them. If you hire a salesperson, effective conversion rate has been what they've been taught for their whole career. So you don't have to teach ECR to a salesperson. They're like, yeah, that's how I've been graded for my whole life. So I'd rather teach a salesperson legal than teach a legal person sales. And when I shifted to that, I realized my closing percent, my ECR went way up, way up. Plus we do ongoing sales training. So, and it sounds yucky to lawyers to talk about sales. A couple of my employees that were at high levels were bothered when I started to refer to it as sales, but I said, we're only going to refer to that internally. We're not going to tell clients that we're going to send you to our sales team. But internally, I wanted to make sure that we had that shift to sales instead of intake.
It's got to be clear.
So that's intake. So that's 4 of many intake KPIs, but those are the most 4 important: leads, qualified leads, signed cases, and ECR. So that's my main 4 for intake. So moving on to pre-suit, we measure total cases per lawyer, total cases per case manager. And I have up on the screen that in pre-suit, we have 300 cases per lawyer. And, you know, one of the lectures I give that's a whole hour or two is just on this metric right here. Why 300? Why 150 per case manager? How do you do that? How do you staff that? How do you manage that? But that is the metric that we use, which is total cases per lawyer in pre-suit only. Pre-suit only. I'm going to repeat that a ton. If you don't have your pre-suit divided out from your litigation, this does not apply. And anyone I coach, I force them to divide out their pre-suit and litigation, because I can't coach you if you don't divide it out. They're different animals, and it's basically you got to do it this way, or I can't coach you. So pre-suit is 300 cases because they're just different. You manage them way differently than the litigation case. It's two different sports, and it's baseball and basketball. To me, it's totally different.
Yeah.
So that's our pre-suit metric. Cases in each phase. So if you don't have a CRM where you put cases in phases, you're really not managing your law firm too well, to be honest. In FileVine, I know some firms that have 10 or 12 phases. We have 60 wow. phases total across the board, because we want to be able to do reporting, and we want to be able to do flow analysis to see how quickly our cases are getting through. And the more phases you have, the more you can granularly figure out what phase each case is in.
Wow.
So we have a ton of pre-suit phases and lit phases and closing phases and intake phases, because we want it very carefully measured and documented. So cases settled per month. Of course, you're going to measure that, I hope. How many cases you're settling per week, per month, per quarter, whatever unit of time, but how many cases are you settling? In the sneaker analogy or the Foot Locker analogy, how many pairs of sneakers did you sell that month? How can you run a store if you don't know how many sales you closed per month? So cases settled per month. And that's very different than the cases where you took a fee, because we all know that you settle a case on day 1, and maybe you're not able to take your fee till day 30 because you have to negotiate the medical bills, the liens, etc. So how many cases did you take a fee on? And the gap of time between when you settle a case and when you're able to take the fee is super important, because you know, when you sell a pair of sneakers, how long is it till you get the money from Amex or Visa? That's when you can actually pay your employees, right? You can't pay them on the sale, on the cash register. You got to pay them when you actually get the money. So I can't pay my lawyers when they settle a case. And if you're paying your lawyers when they settle a case, you're making a mistake.
Yeah.
Pay your lawyers when the fee is taken, not when they settle the case, because you don't get the money till the fee is taken. And then, of course, your average fee per case. And this is a good example of where you must divide it up pre-suit versus lit. If you know your average fee per case globally in your whole firm, that's a good data piece, but it doesn't give you enough information, because you're comparing two sports, baseball and basketball. So you must know your average fee per case in pre-suit. I'm above $15,000 just for pre-suit. That's high, very high, and very good because of my medical management program that I have, that I use to maximize case value. I know Chad Dudley has an entire course, he's in Louisiana, called the Accelerator course, where he teaches an entire seminar on medical management and maximizing case value. So if you've never heard of Chad Dudley in Louisiana or his Accelerator program, you might want to take a look at that. I'm partners with Chad in a mastermind that we do. And so I love stealing his stuff. He steals my stuff. But if you're looking to maximize your case value, that's the only seminar series that I know of that's called the Accelerator program. Google it and take that course. It's fantastic. So I can get up as high as $15,000 per pre-suit case, and that's the fee. That's not the settlement. That is the fee. So that's pretty high. In talking to lawyers across the country, I would say if you're at 7,000 to 8,000, you're in the bottom third. If you're 8 to 12, you're in the middle. If you're above 12, you're probably doing pretty well. Do you differ from that, Kevin, or you haven't studied this particular metric?
I mean, I interview a lot of law firms that might want to work with us, and I ask them all these types of questions. So, how many leads you're getting? How many qualified leads? What's your average fees? Sometimes they don't know this question for sure.
Right.
Well, But sometimes I'm like, well, what's your revenue? That's the first question I ask them. I'm really scared when they go, well, recently or last year, and they're like thinking, I'm like, so, but yeah, I want to know their average, because if we're doing marketing and we're driving leads, depending on what kind of practice area that they might be focused on, just need to know where they are, like what is their average case value, and then yeah, definitely split it across if it's litigation versus settlement. So, or they might be divorced with flat, or I got flat fees.
Sure.
So there's all kinds of different factors there.
Definitely a lot of factors, and sometimes law firms have thresholds that they won't take a case if it's soft tissue, or they won't take a case if there's no property damage. So all of these thresholds and factors and come into play in your average fee per case. But in general, most lawyers have similar thresholds. So as I said before, if you're above 10,000, you're doing okay. If you're above 12, you're doing pretty well. And I'm just talking about pre-suit. You're doing pretty well. And I'll get to litigation in a minute, but I like to separate them. I'm a big proponent. I will scream it from the rooftop that you need to split up your pre-suit and your lit departments and measure them differently. So those are 5 KPIs for pre-suit. And a 6th one is the average duration of your case. So how long does it take? What is your throughput? Different states are different, probably, even in pre-suit. But how long does it take to work up a soft tissue case? I mean, they're done treating in a couple months. You send out a demand. 3 to 4 months should be your typical soft tissue case. To be honest, that should be processed, because we all know that cases don't get better.
Yeah,
they get worse. Your client has another accident, your client's caught on surveillance, your client does something stupid, your client gets arrested, your client disappears. So cases get worse. So the quicker your throughput, the better, for so many reasons. We're averaging about 9 months right now, which is pretty good. So that does include cases where a person has surgery. So that's going to take longer, and that's the throughput. And the throughput depends on what your statute of limitations is, because that may force you to get cases into litigation quicker. So our average is 9 months. I know some guys who are trying to get it to 6 months, but my opinion is if you're trying to get it that low, you may not be medically managing it correctly, because you may be leaving money on the table with surgeries or injections or things that have been recommended. So I don't necessarily think there's a sweet spot in there where you're making sure that the client's getting all the treatment they've been recommended. Because if you're settling it too early and you financially incentivize settling it too early, then the lawyer's going to tell you, hey, the person doesn't want surgery. Hey, the person doesn't want injections. When in fact, that hasn't been explored well enough with the client. So when it gets explored well enough, then it lengthens the time and it lengthens the throughput beyond 3 months. Because it may take a person a while to become so depressed that they need surgery. Or it takes a while to come around to the fact that you may need invasive procedures if it's indicated. And that lengthens the time. But that's the correct ethical thing to do, is to give the client an opportunity to realize that this pain may never go away without an invasive procedure. So that's why I say the law firms that are doing it in 3 or 4 months, they may be churning and burning their files, but are they really ethically doing the right thing by the client? Because the client may call them a few years later and say, you know what, damn it, I need a surgery, and we settled too early. So 9 months, is that the right amount of time? I don't know. I have no idea. What I do know is that's the sweet spot for us, where we think we're doing the right thing by the client, yet we're still creating a good throughput. So that's pre-suit. So moving on to litigation, it's somewhat similar. How many cases do you have per lawyer? Now in our firm, we reach for a goal of 35 to 40 cases per lawyer. Now, there's a lot of qualifications to that. What kind of law firm do you have? Do you have associates? I don't have any associates. I have only trial lawyers. So we have experienced trial lawyers. Because of that, I pay them a lot of money. And because of that, we don't file suit on cases unless there's a surgery. Now I'm going to repeat that. We don't file suit in my firm. We refer them out if there's no surgery. So because of that, all our 35 to 40 cases have a 6-figure value. If they have a 6-figure minimum value, then each of our lawyers can only handle between 35 or 40 cases. I don't have any 30-year-old attorneys who are litigating soft tissue cases that we are training to be good lawyers. That's not my business model. So if you've got one of those guys, maybe he can handle 60 soft tissue cases. Maybe. Not my firm, because we only handle no surgery, no suit. That's our slogan in our firm. No
love it.
surgery, no suit. Now that's a business model that works for me. For me, you may have a different business model. The listeners may have a different business model. My business model is no surgery, no suit, because I only hire guys who are like 42, 43 or above in age with little kids. So that's a very specific business model that I've determined that works best for me.
Love it.
So I'm at 35 to 40 cases per lawyer. So lawsuits filed per month, that's another throughput metric. And we want to have, ours is 2 per month per lawyer. So we have a goal that with our throughput ratio and how quickly we move files, it's how many lawsuits filed per month per firm and then per lawyer. So we have goals for that. That's a litigation metric, is how many lawsuits do you file? And then cases in each phase. Again, we have many phases within the litigation phase. Some people just have litigation as a phase. I don't think that's great, because where in litigation? Pre-mediation? Post-mediation? Is it on a trial docket? Is it not on a trial docket? Does it need to be noticed for trial? Has it already been noticed for trial? These are all phases because you want to know where in that process the litigation is. So if you have one phase called in litigation, that's a start. It's a good start, but you need 5 more at least. So,
Yeah,
and
how are you
when
going to forecast or
is
predict what
you're going to forget. How are you going to know where it is in litigation? Did you file suit last week, or has it been in litigation for 3 years? So again, phases is another KPI. And then the same as pre-suit, cases settled per month. Same as in pre-suit. How many pairs of sneakers did you sell this month? That's cases settled per month. And then fees taken per month or per quarter. Same as in pre-suit. It's just the same metric in a different department. And then the average fee, again, average fee per litigation case. Now I put on the screen here, my average fee in litigation is $100,000, $100,000, which in Florida, our fee is 40%. So that means our average case settles for $250,000. So the full value of our average litigation case is $250,000. A lot of people are like, holy crap, that's really high. That's great. Well, the reason is, as I said, if there's no surgery or worse, 2 surgeries or death or something like that, it's not going into litigation. So $100,000 average fee per case is true in my firm because we only have surgery cases and above. Yours may be way lower, and that's fine. But again, my business model leads to an average settlement of $250,000, which is a fee of $100,000. Again, these are metrics. It doesn't matter what your numbers are. It matters that you measure them. So I measure average fee per case. And then the average duration of the case, same as pre-suit. Now, I know that in my jurisdiction in Florida, in Palm Beach County, Florida, it takes about 10 months from the day I file the lawsuit, average, till the day it gets to verdict or settles. So our goal is 10 months. So that's within litigation, the day from the lawsuit is filed till the day it's typically resolved. Wow. So that's pretty quick. In New York, it can be years. In other jurisdictions, it can be years. So this one is very dependent on the jurisdiction you're in, how crowded your docket is, where you live, urban versus rural, etc. So again, it's not as important what the number is, it's that you measure it and see how it changes over time. And we started about 16 months. We put in some methods to speed it up and some rules and procedures to speed it up. We're now at about 10 months in litigation. So again, if it gets measured, it gets done. So that's 7 metrics for litigation. And then we'll go to the money. You talked about Kevin, you said when you're looking at a firm, you say, what's your revenue? Well, so we have a whole metrics department about money, because that is part of running a business is your money.
You got to have some money in there.
You got to have some money to pay your folks. I often laugh. I tell them, if I can pay you guys in settlements and happiness, I'd be happy to, but you wouldn't be able to buy food. You need money. We all need money to run our company. So one metric in the finance department is the total amount of fees year to date, which is how much money have you brought in from January 1st until today. I know that number pretty much by heart. I look at it every week. Is how much money have I brought in this year? If you run a store selling sneakers and you don't know how much money you've made this year, you probably aren't running a very good store. So same with a law firm. How much money? And it's usually in QuickBooks. I hope you use QuickBooks or some similar software. Whatever you use, there's a number. It's in your it's in your profit and loss. And if you don't look at your profit and loss, please hire someone who will, because you need someone looking at your P&L. So how much money have you made year to date? And then divide it up: litigation, pre-suit, litigation, referred out cases. We have a separate line in QuickBooks for cases you've referred out, because why should you lump that with everybody else, all the other fee income categories? If you refer out cases, you should be measuring what you've earned this year in cases referred out. A lot of firms, they're just referral firms. So maybe that's their biggest income, is just referred out.
Yeah, I've met a lot of folks that they
lot of
don't
them.
even practice. They just refer.
Yeah, there's lots of firms that advertise a ton, and they're referral firms, and that's okay. I benefit from those firms. They refer them to me. Many lawyers across the country refer their Florida cases to me. So we actually work them. But if you're a referral firm, that's your biggest income right there. And then mass torts is another one that if you don't measure that separately, if you're into mass torts, that should be a different income line. You know, many of the bigger firms and mine either do mass torts in-house, or they work with other firms. They do joint ventures. I joint venture. So I have a separate line in my QuickBooks for mass torts income. And then the grand total. The grand total is, again, how much money have you earned this year to date? If you don't sum it up, you don't know the answer to
Total
those.
sales. Yeah.
Total sales. There you go. Total sales. And then, of course, profit. How much profit have you earned year to date? So that's a very simple P&L calculation. How much have you earned minus how much you've spent? And, you know, that's one of my desert island KPIs, right? If I was about to die and I needed to know how my firm's doing, how much did we earn this year? How much did we spend this year? What's my profit? I can now move off into the sunset and pass away, at least knowing that information. I probably want to call my wife and tell her goodbye too. But yeah, it's nice to know what
money for you.
Exactly.
Well, you know, a whole show on P&L could be
absolutely. Yeah, just merely dealing with your P&L and figuring it out, and your balance sheet is a whole show in and of itself. So profit in dollars is important, but there's another way of measuring it, of course, which is profit in percentage. So I very often get asked, what should be your profit in percentage? And that there's a lot of different answers to that. Some very aggressive guys like our John Robbins, who you had on your show, say it should be above 30%, even more. I'm not sure I agree with 30%. That's pretty aggressive, depending on how big you are. So anywhere, you know, there's some law firms that are at 10 or 12% that are just fine. My goal is 25% a year. I have a pretty big firm. It's an 8-figure firm. If I can earn 25% on my multiple 8 figures, I'm a happy man every year. So, but we're in a growth year this year where we've invested millions of dollars more in marketing. So this particular year, I'll disclose that I'm probably going to be under 20%, maybe even under 15%. But if that's an intentional move, and you know that that's going to happen, and you're investing in infrastructure, then it's okay. But again, if it gets measured, it gets done. I made a decision as a CEO this year for 2024 that I'm okay around the 15% because I'm investing a couple $1 million more in marketing. So as long as I know what I'm doing and I know that my percentage is going to go down, then at least my being below 25% is acceptable, and I made a conscious choice this year. So what's
back into your firm? So
yeah, of course, I'm reinvesting. So I couldn't have done that when I was 30. I didn't have the money. I couldn't. I had to pay for my kids to, you know, go to preschool. But, you know, at this point in my career, I can take a year where I only earn 10 or 15%. We should all have such problems, right? So I'm blessed that I can take such a year. So profit in dollars and profit in percentage.
I just did a glance at mine, and I'm running at 28% right now.
That's fantastic.
Which I'm a marketing company.
You are. So, you know, any company. I mean, I think if you read the book Profit First, which Kevin, you said you run your company on, they say that should be the first thing that you plan into your metrics is your profit. And I don't run Profit First, but it's a great concept, which is profit should be the first thing you look at that you plan for. And does that book have a number in it, Kevin, that you should be targeting?
It does. I mean, we've kind of, again, outgrown it, and we started out with it years ago. Really helped us kind of get things in order. But it's really, I guess the easiest way to think about it is if you should have a new or small firm. If you got collected $1, Craig gave me $1 right now for services. The book starts with like a 10% number of off the top profit. This is not extra profit or net profit for things. This is as the owner profit that should be put aside that you can take freely without worrying about other things. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, could you run your whole company off 90 cents? You get $1. Can I run the whole company off 90 cents? If not, you have problems. And so it's really a way to kind of look for those issues and restructure. And it's
Sure.
a great starting point for businesses. It's
Yeah.
probably it's harder to move into profit first if you have a complex business that's already been in operation for a long time. So
Sounds like, yeah, I think it's good when you start your company to start thinking in that terms. And the title of the book speaks for itself, that you look at your profit and you work that into your analysis at the beginning, not at the end, as a byproduct. It's not a byproduct according to that book. It's more like a starting point, which is excellent. I think it's an excellent concept.
well, think about your CPA. Normal CPAs, they work backwards, right? So everything is, here's what happened, here's all your expenses. Oh, here's all your profit. Okay, well, where is it? Well, you made it. I don't know where it's at now. It's not in your bank account. It's
Right.
so profit first is like flips that around. It's, we're going to take the profit out, then the money goes in the operations account, and then it gets distributed to other buckets twice a month. So
Yep.
taxes and fees, business licenses, everything that you have to account for. It's like your grandma's envelope system.
Right.
So when I take $100, I'm going to put $20 in here for meals. I'm going to put 20, so it's really, we have like lots of bank accounts, probably dozens of bank accounts. So at a glance, kind of like a KPI, you can see where's my money and how's it distributed. And that's been helpful. But again, we've kind of outgrown that concept at this point, but
sure. So if you target 20%, 25%, 15%, all of these numbers are acceptable depending on what you're doing that year, depending on what you need to take home. And of course, if you have an 8-figure firm, then that percentage is a much larger number than if you have a 7-figure firm, or less. If your firm earns $200,000, 25% is a certain amount of money. So
tax liabilities for that year, you might want to put money somewhere else or invest 100%. In something else.
All kinds of different ways to manage your profit. Yeah. So those are the financial KPIs. So that's an overview of the KPIs. For those who are watching the video, I'm just going to show you two pictures of Periscope, which is, that's in FileVine. This is what it looks like when you drag your data into Periscope. Smart Advocate does this, Litify does this, they all look the same. The reason I'm showing these pictures is just the two forms of showing data. One is a pie chart. We've all seen pie charts. And the other is a bar graph. I don't know when in school we learned what these things look like. We probably did in some course, maybe statistics, if we took that at some point. But the basic two formats of data display are a pie chart and a bar graph. All of the data management and display programs have some variation of what you're seeing on the screen now. And you can show the same data either in a pie chart or a bar graph. Those are my favorite two. So I just wanted to show what they look like. And this is what they look like in Periscope for those who are watching. And they are good ways that human beings can see things in colors and shapes, because we do see things in colors and shapes pretty well, to display data. So these are two of the 100 cards I have in Periscope that shows the same data or similar data. And it's easy for me to look at these and figure stuff out. So I just want to show a picture of what KPIs look like when they're displayed.
I'm very visual. I think that helps,
yeah,
for me, for sure.
It's super helpful. And, Periscope is the FileVine trade name for the data aggregation program called Domo. So Domo is actually the software. FileVine has relabeled it and rebranded it because they bought the licenses, just like Litify bought the licenses for Salesforce and runs on a Salesforce program. FileVine bought the licenses for Domo and rebranded it as Periscope. So people sometimes in the FileVine world ask me, what's the difference between Periscope and Domo? The answer is no difference. It's just been relabeled as Periscope by FileVine. So that's Periscope. Now, one interesting, I said I'd tell you about one interesting data point. I'll tell you about two. So important business decisions. So why are KPIs so important? Everybody's like, okay, I got it, Craig. You measure everything. You're great. Well, actually, they probably didn't say the you're great part. But they said, why do you measure everything? And I said, because you can action on it. So a data point is worthless unless you do something with it. You can look at it all day, but what are you going to do? So the great one I use is that I measured my pre-suit average fee per case in car accidents versus slip and falls. I entered that analysis thinking I was making more money on my car accidents per case. That's how I entered. That was my hypothesis, if you want to use scientific analysis. My hypothesis at the beginning was I'm earning more money on car accidents. I went in with that hypothesis. So then what do you do next? Well, you get the data and you do your experiment. Remember your 6th grade science project where you go through the scientific process? Well, That was my hypothesis. I went to the next stage, which was data gathering. And the data gathering revealed that I earned 40% less per case on car accidents than I did on a slip and fall. I was blown away. Blown away. This was in 2015, 9 years ago. So the summary to that was I was earning more money when I took a slip and fall case than I was on car accident cases. Now that was fascinating to me. Contrary to my hypothesis, it disproved my hypothesis. So I had to figure out why. So I looked into how we ran the cases, who are the insurance carriers on the other side, if I had different lawyers on these cases, what the hell was going on? Because I thought slip and fall cases were dumb. And we were not advertising for them as much as we could have. So I dug into all this stuff, and I actually created a seminar on why you should handle more slip and falls, teaching my competition my secrets. And I realized all the factors that went into play as to why. Why was I earning more money on slip and falls? So once I came to that determination, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to double down. So what did I do? I bought lots of billboards. I changed up some of my TV. I filmed several slip and fall TV commercials, while other lawyers continued to advertise for car accidents. Why? Because there's actually a prejudice in PI that some lawyers think they're above slip and falls because they're slippies. They're embarrassing. You know, they want to be known as the high-end car accident lawyers. And I was like, you go, boy. You keep handling those car accidents. Refer your slip and falls to me. Why? Because I had data to back it up. And
That's
they
awesome.
didn't. They had ego. That's all they had was ego. So what did I do? I doubled down. I even have on the screen here, other lawyers made fun of me. Yes, they did. They're, Craig, you're that slippy lawyer. You're the slip and fall guy. Banana peels, ha, ha, ha. So I was like, you keep laughing. So I laughed all the way to the bank. So I started advertising. I have on the screen here one of my billboards. Injured, slip and fall, choose the twos. Call 222-2222. That's one of my picture of one of my billboards. Laughed all the way to the bank. Now I went from about having 10% slip and falls in my office. Now I'm at 34% at slip and falls. So it's a great example for me of an action taken on a KPI. That's the best example I can give. And it really increased my revenue because I started taking better cases. So have you actually looked, all the listeners here, have you looked at the types of cases you handle? Even if you're in a different area of law, if you're a family law attorney, do divorces earn you more than child support? Do guardianships earn you more than divorces? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know anything about family law. But if you're doing any area of law, take a look at your inventory. Going back to the Foot Locker analogy, do you earn more on a pair of Air Jordans or a pair of Converses? If you own that sneaker store, you better know what's a better seller, and you better put that in the front of the store.
Yeah, we're got more margin, right?
Where's your margin? It's called margin, and lawyers have never heard the term margin, right? If you own a business, you know the term margin. So where's your best margin? Is it slip and fall cases? Is it auto? Is it medical malpractice? Is it nursing home? What is it? So our best margin at that point was premises cases, slip and fall. So great, best example I can give on a KPI.
That's huge. I think huge. Too, you know, a lot of business owners are folks that things are emotional to them. Like they're emotional about their marketing, their websites, all these things that they want to be involved in. And it's like, take that out of it. What works?
What works? What does the data show?
Yeah. You think this kind of case is sexier, cooler. Yeah. If you have data, you might say, you know what?
As I said before, sexy and cool does not pay your employees. Maybe it pays your ego, but it doesn't pay your employees. So if you do that analysis and figure out where your margin is best, then you market towards that. And that's how we focus data. So I have one more slide, which is, you know, one of the KPIs I track carefully is referrals. So I speak across the country. Of course, one of the reasons I speak is to be well known in Florida. A lot of lawyers in other states see Florida cases. I'd be honored to handle any Florida case. In Florida, we pay 25% referral fee, which is the standard for Florida, even if you're an out-of-state attorney. And a lot of out-of-state attorneys do have people who vacation in Florida and then go back to their home state and say, hey, New York lawyer, I was on vacation in Florida, I got hurt. So I have hundreds of referral attorneys across the country that I love. If you can't remember anything else about me, choose the twos, 222-2222, or just Google Gold Law, pretty easy. So I'd love you to refer cases. I always end with a pitch. If you don't ask, you don't get, right? So anybody listening, if you got a Florida case, please send it over. We're really good. So so I hope that this speech helps you realize the importance of KPIs and the importance of, if it gets measured, it gets done.
No, absolutely, Craig. I mean, I appreciate you putting together the detail here, and just diving into this topic so well. I think it's with the visuals as well. So again, if you're on audio, please check out the video, so you can kind of see what Craig just presented. And also reach out to Craig, connect with him. He just put up his contact information. Also, you can just go to goldlaw.com. You can hit me up, comment, message me, LinkedIn. I'll connect you with Craig as well. But if you're an attorney that's looking for help and guidance, reach out to Craig. If you have referrals, reach out to Craig. So,
and a good way to hear a full day of me, if I was relatively interesting to you, is my 7-Figure Attorney Summit, which I do every year. We get hundreds of lawyers attending. The website is 7figureattorney.com. That's one word, 7figureattorney.com. And I speak, and a lot of my executive team speaks on how we do stuff. And it's very helpful for all types of law, special personal injury attorneys. It's a usually one-day seminar. We may extend it to a day and a half this year. We just finished Boston, so I think we're going to be in Orlando in April of 2025. So if you're interested, get on the mailing list at 7figureattorney.com.
Love that. And just kind of learning what you have today, just going deep on KPIs. I'm sure you can learn a lot at his mastermind groups and things like that. So these things are huge, man. And, with owning businesses, it's all these things you have to work on, all these things you have to learn and do. And the KPIs, for me, some of the most important things to start. You got to have things to measure. You got to be measuring things to make decisions. So starting with a handful of KPIs to get to where Craig's at. I'm kind of in the middle. We probably have a couple dozen KPIs that we track per company, but you kind of grow as you go, right?
You do. I mean, I started out, I had 5 KPIs. Now we got hundreds. So take it slow. The desert island KPIs are just the things you would tell your spouse. So on how your business is doing, start with that. Just start with the basic stuff that probably, if you think about it, you could come up with yourself.
Yeah, then pick up traction. I got the book right here. I got copies in my office. I got copies here. Met Gino in person and followed his stuff, but that be a good introduction. And then EOS will obviously be your next best step from there. So, Craig, man, I appreciate it. Very in depth. Everyone, hopefully you've learned a lot. Back this up. Watch this again, and then reach out to me or Craig if you need help. So,
thanks for having me, Kevin. I was happy to be here.
Yes, sir. I'm finally glad to have you on the show, and everyone, hope it sunk in. And you'll get out there and improve your law firms. Run them like a business, not like a lawyer. We'll talk to you soon. Craig, you can stay on with me. We'll chat backstage.
Yep, sure.
Everyone else, have a great day.